Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. I live alone in a small college town. Although I'm not a student or a faculty member, my apartment is in a duplex on a residential street just a few blocks from campus, which most of the students have left for their winter break. Things get very quiet when they're not around. Late Wednesday night, I woke up to a disturbing sound outside. It was someone crying, but not in a normal way. This was more like delirious wailing. The person didn't sound grief-stricken or panicked, and there were no cries for help. Otherwise, I'd probably have gone outside cautiously to check things out. This sounded more like someone doing an impression of a ghost but being a little too convincing. A sort of over and over. Not a pleasant way to wake up. I'll be honest, I got up and looked out the window but didn't see anyone, and I couldn't tell where the sound was coming from. After a few minutes, the wailing grew distant and things got quiet. I went back to sleep a little unsettled. Thursday night rolled around, and I went to bed as usual, wondering if I'd hear anything again. And sure enough, I was awakened a few hours later, but this time the sound was completely different. At first, I wondered if there had been a heavy snowfall because I heard what sounded like the edge of a shovel scraping the sidewalk. It was very rhythmic. Two plodding footsteps followed by a long and drawn-out scraping. Thud thud scrape. Thud 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 scrape. I got up and looked out the window, where I saw no snow but a dense fog and a woman across the street. It took me a minute to tell if she was wearing some strange hat, but then I realized that the hat was her hair. It was long, down to her waist, and completely filthy and matted, bunched up into a single mass that looked like a gigantic glistening hairball. The woman was standing with her shoulders hunched forward and her arms crossed behind her back like a figure skater or dancer, and she was doing an unusual sort of dance where she would take two heavy stomps and then glide as if she were on ice skates, but there was no ice. I couldn't tell how she was gliding so gracefully and effortlessly across the pavement. It was almost hypnotic to watch because she appeared to be elderly and frail, but she could spin, glide, and maintain balance on a level that would be hard for me to keep up with. Each time she would glide, I'd hear the scrape sound of her shoe against the pavement. There were no additional steps to the dance, just the rhythmic stomp-stomp glide, headed in one direction before twirling around and doing the same steps in the other. After a few minutes, she stopped and then stooped down like a runner at the starting line, dramatically leaning forward with her fingertips lightly touching the ground. She stayed that way for a good minute or two, and it was a very unsettling thing to see in the shadows and fog. Then she slowly stood up, turned facing away from me, and got up on her very tiptoes with her long skinny arms outstretched. Then she broke into a rapid tiptoeing motion that professional ballerinas do. In my mind, I heard that classic cartoon sound effect that plays when a character scampers away, and without a sound, she danced into the fog, and I haven't seen or heard anything from her since. This happened to me many years ago. I am 38 now, and I believe this took place when I was 14 or 15. My family, consisting of myself, my mother and my brother who is 6 years younger than me, were in the process of moving down the road sometime in the near future and had been fixing the new place up so it was move-in ready for us. We had enlisted some help from extended family, mainly my mother's cousin and her adult sons and their wives, to help paint our bedrooms. During one of these days of hard work, we collectively decided that we all wanted Slurpees from a nearby 7-Eleven store. For those who don't know, a Slurpee is a frozen drink, usually in soda flavors, dispensed from a machine with a handle that you push down or pull up. The cups come with a clear dome lid and a long straw with a spoon on the end. Maybe it's just me, but the spoon is pretty useless. The best part is that since you get to prepare it yourself, you can mix any of the dozen or so flavors in any order you'd like. One of my older cousins and I decided to head out to get the drinks while the others continued to work in the house. The drive there and the preparing of the frozen beverages were both uneventful, but what I do remember is walking back outside and hearing a woman screaming something like "Help me" to my left. I turned my head only to witness a middle-aged man wrestling the keys away from an older woman. She was maybe in her 60s. I froze and just watched the scene play out in front of me. The man managed to snatch the keys away from the lady and hopped inside her car, backing it up and taking off with it. The problem was the lady had somehow fallen and landed with her legs under the car, so when he backed up, he ran over her. The police were called, of course, and my cousin and I stayed to give our statements. I managed to memorize the license plate of the stolen car, which came in handy when the lady was so in shock she couldn't remember it herself. I was always told growing up to get the plate number if there was ever an emergency involving a car, and so I did just that. I remember hearing later that the car was found about 30 miles, or about 48 kilometers, away from where it was stolen. I'm not sure what happened to the lady, the man, or the car. Since this was the early 2000s, I highly doubt there would be any information online this long after. The 7-Eleven has since closed and become a few different businesses, the most current being a cell phone store. But anytime I venture past that place, I always think back to that event I witnessed many years ago. This story takes place in November of 2017, and I was 18. I'm a very short girl, only about 4 feet 10 inches. I get anxious when someone even looks at me in a way that suggests they might not like me, so needless to say, I'm incredibly non-confrontational. My friend and I were out shopping. It was something we'd do maybe every few months just to bond, since we didn't have much time to hang out due to college. She's just like me, barely scraping 5'1" and very non-confrontational. It's probably why we became friends. On every shopping trip, we would find ourselves in summers. We're both overly endowed and struggled to find bras anywhere, and in summers always had great sales, so we grabbed the cheap bras while we could. This shopping trip wasn't any different. We browsed shops until we got to in summers, but that's when things took a bit of a turn. I barely stepped foot into the shop when a woman with some sort of Slavic accent stopped me and jabbed her finger into my chest. "Spit the gum out," she demanded. Assuming that she was an employee, I gave a very sheepish "I'm really sorry" and ran out of the shop to spit the gum out and throw it away. When I went back in, I realized that this woman was not an employee. She was a customer who was browsing and happened to be near the door when my friend and I entered the shop. It should have been obvious to me at the time. No salesperson would ever behave like that. Not one that wanted to keep their job anyway. But I kept my head down when I walked past her, holding my breath in hopes that she wouldn't notice me again. And she didn't, and I thought I was in the clear. My friend and I browsed the shop trying to avoid the woman, but the shop wasn't very big, probably only 15 feet by 18 feet, so eventually I ended up at the sales stand by the door where she had been standing. I tried to keep my distance while browsing. I was looking at the price tags but realized that I didn't know what the discount was, so I leaned over slightly to check the discount sign. It's important that I note that this woman had a pushchair, which is a stroller for Americans. You'd think she maybe had a child in the pushchair, but no, it was full of plastic carrier bags. I didn't look too much at it, but I could tell that everything in there was double-bagged and tied shut. Whatever was in those bags, she wanted to protect. This sense of protection became very relevant because when I leaned over to look at the discount sign, I was leaning slightly closer to her pushchair. I was still about 3 feet away from it, but apparently that was too close. The woman was on the other side of the chair, but the moment she saw me, she ran around to it, where I was standing. She hit me in the face. It was somewhere between a slap and a punch, and I couldn't quite tell because I was in shock. All I knew is that it hurt. "Watch the personal space," she hissed in my ear, and I apologized to her. This woman just hit me, and I apologized to her. I regret it now, but at the time, I didn't want to provoke her any further, not that I knew what I did to provoke her in the first place. In my shock, I turned around and ran to the back area, grabbing my friend's hand and pulling her with me. The back area was separated by a tiny wall that only stretched halfway across the shop, since they stored the adult toys there and wanted to keep them out of sight of the general public. I stood there holding my friend's hand and shaking as I whispered, "She just hit me," to my friend. We stood there for a good minute in silence, and my friend was positioned in a way that she could see the rest of the store while I hid behind the wall. "She's gone," my friend told me, and I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding. "Can we stay here for a while?" I asked, worried that the woman would be outside waiting for me. The front of the store was open, but she could have easily just been a couple of feet down the road and out of sight, waiting. My friend agreed, and we slowly browsed the shop again. About 5 minutes later, we got to the counter to check out, and the girl working the counter looked outside and then back at us. "That woman's been in here for 30 minutes. I didn't know what to do," she told the two of us. "What did she say to you?" "She told me to spit out my gum when we first came in, and then she hit me because I was too close to her." "She hit you?" The worker was wide-eyed. "If I'd have known that, I would have called security." "I'm so sorry." I smiled and shrugged. "Meh, it's fine." It wasn't really fine, but it wasn't the worker's fault. She didn't look much older than I did, and I wouldn't have known what to do in that situation either. Still shaken up, my friend and I made our way out of the store. I looked around but didn't see the woman. "Can we just go home now?" I asked my friend. We hadn't finished browsing all the shops, but I was so paranoid that we'd bump into that insane woman again. She agreed, and we got the bus home. When I got home, my parents encouraged me to report the incident to the police. I called the non-emergency line, and their answer was basically, "Well, what do you expect us to do about it?" Unless I went back to in Summers and requested the security footage, which I wasn't sure they actually had, they wouldn't do anything. It's been just over 3 years, and now I'm sure that the woman was likely homeless and/or on drugs. It's the only explanation I can think of for the carrier bags and her protectiveness. It was either everything she owned or drugs, or maybe even both. This happened a while ago, around 2015, but I'll probably never forget it. I was around 21 at the time. I'm female and was still fairly new to the city. I had just gotten out of a bad relationship, wasn't in the best place mentally, and didn't know many people in town besides my ex and his friends. I was on a dating/hookup app looking for people to hang out with casually, maybe find a friends with benefits situation or something. I matched with a 25-year-old guy named Simon. We talked sporadically on the app for a few days, and he told me he was in a band and lived in a house with his bandmates. He sent me their music, just an audio track on YouTube with a heavily edited still image of 4 or 5 guys playing rock instruments. One of them looked like him. The music was an odd mix of styles and not really my thing, but whatever, he seemed like a nice enough guy. After a few days, he stopped replying, and I figured that was that and moved on. Then one day at work, I got a message from him apologizing for being busy and inviting me to a barbecue with his friends and bandmates in their yard. He had mentioned that their band manager provided the house to them to live in. Given the lack of views on their YouTube video and the fact that I had only seen one photo of him playing in the band, I figured he was probably exaggerating. I assumed it was more likely that a bar manager friend gave them a discount on rent in exchange for being a house band or something, and I didn't think much of it beyond that. Normally, I wouldn't have agreed to go to a barbecue alone at a stranger's house, but I was really bored and figured I might be able to overcome some social anxiety, maybe even make some female friends. Since he made it sound like a big party, I looked up the neighborhood he gave me. It was a suburban area with lots of families. I figured being in a yard on a nice summer day wouldn't be overly risky, because there would be plenty of neighbors outside. Plus, it was just a few train stops away from my workplace, and I was off in a few hours. I told him I wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea since I didn't know him well, but I'd stop by for a bit as long as I didn't have to go inside the house. He assured me that was totally fine, which made me feel better. I even avoided drinking anything for the rest of my shift so I wouldn't have to use the bathroom and risk going inside. Since he had implied the event was already underway, I was anxious about just showing up. I knew finding a specific address from the backyard side would be tricky, so I asked Simon if he could meet me at the train station since he said it was a quick walk. He agreed, and I let him know when I was leaving work and what time my train would arrive at his station. Red flag number 1, when I got to the train station around 5:30 p.m., I looked around but couldn't find him. I messaged him, and he said he was running behind and told me to start walking toward the neighborhood. I was about halfway across the massive train station parking lot when I finally spotted him wandering toward me. I recognized his clothes, bell-bottoms, not common, especially for men at the time, and long hair. But up close, his face looked noticeably different from his photos. Maybe it was heavy-duty editing, or maybe he used pictures of his brother or something. I don't even know. But he looked older, not 25, more like 35, and this was the first real red flag. But I brushed it off. Maybe he was just self-conscious. Maybe he smoked a lot and never wore sunscreen. Maybe he just hadn't taken new pictures in a while. And besides, I was mostly there to make friends, so I told myself not to judge. Oh, and he was already very drunk. But a lot of my ex's friends were heavy drinkers, so that didn't seem strange. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.